Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be going through how I blend for digitally. So I wasn't sure about if I was going to make this video or not because I don't really like do's and don'ts videos, I guess. I just don't really like saying this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do, because I think there are techniques that are going to work for you that might not necessarily work for me. So I guess it's a little disclaimer. I don't want to say definitely do this and definitely don't do this. This is just what I found works for me and what I found doesn't work for me. So I'm going to be talking mostly about blending. And I've got my squares here, so I'm going to just show you the basic blending tools first. Hopefully as well you can see I'm drawing on the tablet. Sorry if my shadow is also in there. I hope that's not too distracting. I'm just trying to do the best that I can. Okay, so first of all, I'll start with some very bold colours. So we'll go with orange and purple. Okay, so these are very bold colours. So how I typically blend is I like to take my chalk brush. This is the Chalk 11 Pixels from the Legacy set. I have my pen pressure on. And also, this is pen pressure and pen pressure on, so this changes the size, and opacity pen pressure, so this changes the opacity. So I'm going to turn those on, make sure they're both on, and I'm going to lower my opacity right down. So it's at 37 at the moment, it might change. So I'm going to just colour in my orange, and I'll colour in a little purple square as well. And then what I'm going to do with the low opacity and the chalk brush is I'm just going to push one of them into the other one, and then switch my colour palette. So I just press X, push the other one in, and then just go back and forth until I'm quite happy with how it's blended. Possibly change the direction that I'm blending in. Okay. So that I'm actually quite happy with, and you might be looking at it like, what? It's not blended at all. I can see where the marks are. But actually that's quite good, because then what you do on top of that, if I change the colours again, I'll make them a little bit lighter, is this is a perfect way to make fur, because now the colours are much more, they have texture to them rather than just perfectly smooth blending. There is a texture there, so when you work the fur over the top it looks much more natural because you have these layers behind them. So hopefully you can see how that's starting to work, and although it's super messy and not very well blended, that works for the fur because it adds depth to it. Even though I've only done one layer of fur on top of that, it does add some sort of depth and some sort of texture to it. So this is the don'ts that I'm going to do. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'll pick the same colour. And again, this is a technique that might work for you if you do a smooth surface, for example. I'm sure this technique would work fine. And I do occasionally use this, but again I prefer to use the chalk harsh brush. So I'm going to change it to a soft round brush. And this is, I'm going to keep it at 50% opacity-ish, and I'm just going to go over it. So you can see how that's much more smooth, but actually when you're doing fur, it can look a little bit blurry. It's a very, what's the word, airbrush type look. So if that's what you're going for, then that works for you, that's fine. But I tend to find that it can make the subject look a little bit too blurry if you do your whole piece with this brush rather than using more of a textured, harsher brush. Okay, so another thing that I used to do myself, which I didn't really like the look of, but I was a beginner at the time, is blending with the actual blending tools. So this is definitely something that a lot of people start with when they start doing digital art, because they're the tools that you use for blending. Why wouldn't you use them? So I'm going to do a couple more And these tools are over here. I think it's this one. Nope. It's been a while since I used these tools. Here. Okay, so we have the blur tool and the smudge tool. So I used to use the smudge tool quite a lot, and I used to use it on a kind of dotted, splattery, textured brush, so it's just a load of little dots, looks like that. And this was quite good. I like to use it for skin tones, so again, like I said, this tool is a tool that works for certain surfaces, but for fur I didn't really enjoy it that much. And basically you take the little splattery brush, you go across to the left, and then once that's blended you take it up, and it's like a cross hatching. So you can see how it's kind of blended, but unlike the ones we did over here before, it's not very smooth and there's quite a harsh line. So you can see how it's the blending hasn't spread very much. It's very contained in this tiny little area here, which isn't so good when you're working on a larger scale. So another common blending technique that I saw used, I never used this one myself, but it is the blur tool. And again, you'd think it'd be quite good for blending because it kind of blurs the lines, but it just does exactly what it says, and it blurs the image. So when you look at it like the whole piece, it really does blur the whole piece, and you get a really kind of fuzzy, out of focus look on your work. I'm not even sure if you can see, it's barely blended this piece together at all. So this definitely isn't a tool that I would recommend. The same with this one. Sometimes it can work, but personally I'd rather stick to the textured brush. Now again, the softer brush can work quite well because it is a very soft airbrushed look. So if you're really struggling to get a blurry blended look and you do want a nice smooth blend, I would recommend using the soft brush. But as I said before, personal preference, I just prefer to use the textured brush. So I'm going to try and very quickly, it'll probably be very rough, do a little swatch of this false fur. So again, I'm just using the textured brush. I'm just going to kind of scribble on a load of colours. I think I will colour pick my colours for this just because I'm trying to show the technique of blending and not really colour picking or trying to focus on that too much. So you can see how this is kind of quite dark. I'm going to try and make it a little bit more pinky. And it's not very blended at the moment, but that's fine. And to make sure I don't go out of the lines, I put a clipping mask onto these little squares I made. So that just means I can't go out the lines. It's like using masking tape or masking fluid or Frisket film, whatever you like to use. That's all it is when I used a clipping mask. Okay, so there you go, that's the base, and you can see it's very nice and rough. There's a lot of texture going on. I'm really not too bothered about how I can see all the texture and blotches. If you do want to smooth it down, what I'd recommend is dropping your opacity right down to probably about 10 to 20, and then colour picking, so you press Alt, and then kind of on the layer where it starts to blend in, press Alt, and then you kind of just paint over that. Again, press Alt, and then paint over it. Alt, and paint over it, and kind of just repeat that step until you start to get a more gradual blend. So this is how you kind of get a more soft look if you want to use a textured brush rather than the airbrushed look. And although it is kind of a little bit fuzzy, it's definitely not as fuzzy as if you use a soft brush, and it doesn't look quite as out of focus. So I'm just softening up these lines, and then again using Alt, pushing it right down and blending it out. Okay, so I'm quite happy with how that's blended. Again, you can see texture, but that's completely fine. So I'm going to try and do the same thing now, but with a soft brush. So I'm going to get my soft round brush. I'll pick the colours from this piece, why not? Oh, that's the blur. I'll get my soft round brush, colour pick these parts. Oh, wrong layer. And I'll drop my opacity down just to make it fair. And now what I'm going to do to make sure I can try and blend these as softly as I can is I'm going to turn my pen pressure off. So that changes the size of the brush. And I'm going to just do the same thing with Alt and mix it. Okay, so there you go. So you might be looking at these and thinking, what are you talking about? You're an absolute madman. This side is a lot more rough and doesn't look as blended as this side. This side is beautiful and almost smooth, and that's completely fine. But I like doing fur. Most of my subjects are very fluffy subjects, so I like a little bit of texture to show through. And when I'm doing traditional art, a lot of the paper texture sometimes shows through, and this helps create the illusion of fur. So working on something that's super smooth isn't going to work as well when you're doing fur, in my personal opinion anyway. But if you're doing something like clothing or skin tones, this might work a little bit better just for the initial base, and then you can add texture on top of it. You might not want a very textured base compared to when you're doing fur. So again, that's why I don't really like saying do's and don't, because it can work for some subjects and some people work this way and completely love it. That's fine. This is just how I like to do it. So I'm going to try and add a little bit of fur now, just so you can kind of see how they work together. So take my chalk brush, I'm going to work on this side, all working on the same layer, and I'm just going to very, very roughly add some little hairs in. Again, this is going to be super, super rough because I'm trying to be as quick as possible and also get as much information as I possibly can out. Okay, so put my pen pressure back on. I'm just going to squiggle some lines. I'm going to make them quite big. Squiggle some lines. These are our shadows, shadowy bits of fur. If you've seen my real-time video of the drawing the foal, you'll see kind of in a little bit more depth the actual fur technique that I do use. So please go and check that out. I would also like to say that this might be my last digital video for a while. But if you would like to see more, please let me know. Leave a comment down below what kind of subject you'd like me to cover next time. But I will try and get back to doing some more traditional videos. Okay, so this is super rough, it's super messy. Honestly, I would rather spend a lot longer on this, but I'm going to try and wrap it up a little bit so you can kind of get an idea of what's happening. And I'm just mixing the colours as I go, which definitely helps to blend, create a little bit of depth and the illusion of fur. So again, not being super accurate, this is probably the messiest thing I have ever done, so my apologies. But I hope you found it useful so far. Okay, so you can see how we're definitely starting to get a little bit of texture. It's starting to blend together by mixing colours, and if I was going to blend it even more, I'd add more colours. Again, press Alt where the colours start to mix, and then paint over them so you can see how they're starting to mix together. Alt. I'm going to zoom in so you can see what I mean. So when I talk about when the colours start to mix, you can see how this is very dark and this is a lot lighter. Whereas this area is kind of mixed in between both of the colours. So that's when I press Alt and I'll select on that area, and then again when it mixes, select Alt and then blend it. So there you go. So hopefully you can see how that's starting to blend by pressing Alt and doing that. And using more colours will definitely help to blend it also. So now I'm going to show on this side how using a soft brush can kind of make it look a little bit blurry sometimes. So I'm going to pick the same colours to try and make it fair and easy. Oh, wrong layer every time. Okay. So you can see how this is a lot fuzzier. And while it kind of looks a lot cleaner and a lot more blended, it's not really creating the illusion of fur. It's just looking quite, not sure what the word is, quite out of focus. Like if you squint your eyes and you look at it from afar, or if you blur your image, you mess up your focus, all that jazz. This is how it would look. And again, it can work if you use it as a base sometimes. To have a nice soft base might be something that you'd like to do. But again, for me personally, I like to have a much sharper base to work on top of. And again, just adding some highlights in. I'll try and make my brush a little bit smaller. There you go. So hopefully you can see the difference between the two. Again, if this is something that you like, maybe you can try this and give it a go. A good mix between the two is always quite nice. So maybe to kind of soften up these sharper layers, let me switch back to this layer. To maybe kind of soften up some of these hairs, you might add a soft brush over the top, which will kind of soften it out. But if you just use kind of purely one brush, you'd either get something that's too sharp or something that's too blurry and out of focus. Again, this is completely my own opinion. If you like how this looks, feel free to use it, but I definitely prefer a more sharper look to my finished pieces. I'm sorry that I didn't get to do the whole fur swatch. I thought this would be a lot quicker, but unfortunately just didn't turn out that way. This has probably gone on way too long. But I hope you found it useful. Yeah, I really hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if you found it useful. Leave a comment down below. And if you'd like to see me kind of take on any other subject, please leave that in the comments below as well. I'd love to hear what you think, and I'll try and draw whatever you'd like me to in the next video. And thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.